Soldiers gone missing.
Family and friends concerned about their loved one who's been missing for more than a week.
After nearly 2 months, still not one sign of missing soldier Vanessa Gillespie.
CID is also looking for Private Second Class Gregory Morales.
Fort Hood officials say he was placed on AWOL status on August 20th, but that status has since been upgraded to desertion.
Their families on the front lines fighting for the truth.
Well, I feel he was failed in every way.
The Army has now confirmed the identity of human remains found in a shallow grave.
How could this happen on military base? How could this happen while she was on duty?
Pressure on post mounts day by day, minute by minute. The unfolding scandal grabbing attention coast to coast.
Her death igniting protests and demand for justice.
25 News was there every step of the way. And tonight, this is what we've found.
They had to have known that this was an issue.
It's been a nightmare for Kim Wedo. You're more than familiar with the tragic story of Vanessa Gillespie, which gripped the nation over the last 8 months.
But another family's heartbreak began playing out almost a year earlier in 2019. Gregory Wedo Morales was just days away from leaving the Army when he suddenly vanished. The questions have only grown since then.
Answers are hard to come by when your 23-year-old adventurous son somehow, some way, ends up in a shallow grave for more than 9 months.
Might have been able to get all of my son back instead of just the parts they found. Oh.
Kim Wedo is desperate to know the why, to learn how Gregory, a fun-loving private stationed at Fort Hood since 2015, could suddenly vanish in August of 2019.
And these are all things I'm finding out a year and a half later of all this stuff that didn't get done in time because they wouldn't listen to me when I said he's not AWOL.
Before Vanessa's case, before we knew about so many other soldiers on Fort Hood dying from suicide, homicide, or experiencing horrific assaults, there was Greg, a young man Army brass insisted just left.
While before I didn't necessarily blame the Army for his disappearance, I blamed them for not looking. Now I blame the Army. They had to have known that this was an issue.
His mom says new findings from a civilian review report, which details just how ill-prepared Fort Hood was to solve crimes like a disappearance or a murder, is evidence enough that change is overdue.
They didn't look for him. They didn't care about looking for him. He was not a priority to them. As it would appear that suicide, rape, and assault is not a priority down there.
She is hopeful that's no longer the case. And even though her son's case and Vanessa's case are very different, Kim also feels a very strong connection.
It's a little strange to be friends through tragedy, I guess. The Guillen family, they're some of the most amazing and strong people I've met.
Authorities say the investigation into Gregory's death is, quote, ongoing and being investigated as a homicide. Kim simply wonders how long she'll have to wait until she finds any kind of an answer.
Well, more than 10 months after Gregory went missing, his remains were found in a shallow ditch in the exact spot where his abandoned car had been located just months before. It was only by coincidence that his remains were found, not because the Army was looking for him, but in fact, because they were searching for another soldier, the one who gained national attention, Vanessa Gillespie.
Could suddenly vanish in August of 2019.
And these are all things I'm finding out a year and a half later of all this stuff that didn't get done in time because they wouldn't listen to me when I said he's not AWOL.
Before Vanessa's case, before we knew about so many other soldiers on Fort Hood dying from suicide, homicide, or experiencing horrific assaults, there was Greg, a young man Army brass insisted just left.
While before I didn't necessarily blame the Army for his disappearance, I blamed them for not looking. Now I blame the Army. They had to have known that this was an issue.
His mom says new findings from a civilian review report, which details just how ill-prepared Fort Hood was to solve crimes like a disappearance or a murder, is evidence enough that change is overdue.
They didn't look for him. They didn't care about looking for him. He was not a priority to them. As it would appear that suicide, rape, and assault is not a priority down there.
She is hopeful that's no longer the case. And even though her son's case and Vanessa's case are very different, Kim also feels a very strong connection.
It's a little strange to be friends through tragedy, I guess. The Guillen family, they're some of the most amazing and strong people I've met.
Authorities say the investigation into Gregory's death is, quote, ongoing and being investigated as a homicide. Kim simply wonders how long she'll have to wait until she finds any kind of an answer.
Well, more than 10 months after Gregory went missing, his remains were found in a shallow ditch in the exact spot where his abandoned car had been located just months before. It was only by coincidence that his remains were found, not because the Army was looking for him, but in fact, because they were searching for another soldier, the one who gained national attention, Vanessa Gillespie.
The search for missing Fort Hood soldier Vanessa Gillespie stretched on land.
At the beginning, it was like, where are you, Vanessa? Where are you? Tell us, talk to us.
In water.
This is an area that's got to be saturated.
And outside the gates of Fort Hood.
We were being told, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time, that's the Army. The thing about it is we were not setting out to make anybody mad. We wanted to find Vanessa.
It was April 22nd at Fort Hood, the last time family heard from Vanessa Gillespie, and the last place she was seen alive. That's when her family reported her missing, sparking the beginning of their journey for answers.
How can this happen on military base? How can this happen while she was on duty?
The Army Criminal Investigation Department says Gillespie had been in the armory room that day where she was called into work, but the only clues left behind were her keys, work badge, and wallet.
I said every time that we reach out to Fort Hood.
Many questions surround the soldier accused of killing Vanessa Gillespie. As investigators closed in on Specialist Aaron Robinson, he fled off post and killed himself. What many want to know, who is Aaron Robinson and what would motivate him to murder? Is Aaron Robinson.
Community is mourning the loss of Specialist Vanessa Gillespie.
Hundreds of people are out here outside the Fort Hood gates.
Criminal profilers say the crime itself gives several clues.
He's stealthful. He's engaged in behavior to keep from being identified or arrested. He's engaged in this body disposal behavior because he does not want Vanessa's remains to be found, at least in my opinion. That's very high-risk behavior.
25 News investigators found no criminal record. But in this never-before-aired video of Robinson, that's him, number 64 on the sidelines, we know he played football in high school at Thornton Fractional North High School in Calumet City, Illinois. Not a standout, no newspaper articles or social media posts about him. And in this video, not participating or engaged. What one former FBI profiler calls antisocial behavior, with no display of empathy toward others.
That really goes to the personality of that offender. Robinson has taken this young woman's life, and now most people would be in such an emotional state if they had done that, but not in this case. He's now able to start thinking strategically. What do I do with the body? That's not typical.
He enlisted in the Army in October 2017 and was a combat engineer. The 20-year-old deployed to Iraq in 2018 for 7 months. He lived off post with his girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, who spent time in the foster care system, according to friends, and was going through trouble in her marriage to another soldier.
Cecily Aguilar did tell us that Specialist Robinson told her that he killed Vanessa because she saw a picture on his cell phone of her, and he feared that she would go to the chain of command and get him in trouble for having an affair.
There was no romantic relationship between Guillen and Robinson. Family members say Robinson sexually harassed Guillen, an unreported incident, and as we learned, part of a much larger problem on Post. Cecily Aguilar was originally supposed to appear in court back in September, but because of the coronavirus pandemic, that hearing has been pushed back multiple times. She is now set to stand before a judge on January 5th for a rearraignment, but her trial in federal court is slated for January 21st.
Following the deaths of Gregory, Vanessa, and others, and after so many instances of sexual harassment and assault began to surface, an independent civilian review was announced for Fort Hood. Released earlier this month, it shows in stark detail that problems have been building there at Post for years.
The tragic death of Vanessa Gillespie and a rash of other challenges at Fort Hood forced us to take a critical look at our systems, our policies, and ourselves.
The U.S. Secretary of Army appointed a Fort Hood Independent Review Committee and were asked to conduct a comprehensive assessment of the Fort Hood command climate and culture and its impact, if any, on the safety, welfare, and readiness of our soldiers and units. After 103 days, surveying 31,612 soldiers and interviewing 647 more, 9 findings were put in the report. Some included the SHARP program to be ineffective. Reports of sexual assault and sexual harassment at Fort Hood are significantly underreported, and there were no established procedures for first-line supervisors and failure to report situations that needed critical action in the first 24 hours.
We're going to fix these issues and change the culture that allowed them to happen.
The findings laid out a trend of violent sex crimes that were notably higher in comparison with any other Army installation. Based on a 5-year average rate per 100,000, Fort Hood's rates of violent sex crimes came in at 30.6% higher than the U.S. Army Forces Command and 43.2% higher than the Army. First-term enlisted soldiers at Fort Hood also had the highest sex offense rates. Carrie F. Ricci, an FHIRC member, listened to many soldiers' stories that had gone unnoticed and unreported.
We heard you and we believe you.
The fear of retaliation and being ignored hung heavy on the heads of many soldiers, and there was a worry if issues were brought up.
It was a little bit cathartic for many of them because someone was listening and they felt that they were being heard.
Ryan McCarthy recently signed a new missing soldier policy as defined in the report. There were no established procedures for first-line supervisors when soldiers fail to report or check in, and that requires immediate action within the first 24 hours.
It clarifies expectations and responsibilities of unit commanders and law enforcement authorities, focusing on the first 48 hours a soldier is missing.
The Fort Hood Independent Review Committee found that in cases handled in coordination with local law enforcement, there were often insufficient information to make a determination. In one case, a soldier was reported AWOL and declared a deserter a month later. A few weeks after, the soldier was found dead at his residence. Not to mention the unsolved murder of soldier Gregory Morales, who disappeared in August 2019 and was also declared AWOL.
Why wasn't any of this stuff done so that we would have had answers a year and a half ago? Instead of, still now just finding out things.
McCarthy explained that new procedures to fix these findings will be in effect by March 2021. And as both he and General McConville say, change starts with leadership.
I want to make sure that we have a environment where everyone is treated with dignity and respect and everyone takes care of each other. And we expect our leaders to do that. And that's what we're going to do.
Now, even before the report became public, Army officials insisted they were looking to change the environment there on post.
Well, the Army recently took a chapter from the Human Resources Playbook, hoping more dialogue might root out more problems. Some experts in the field say the move has a good chance of getting results.
The U.S. Army anthem recalls an Army working like a well-oiled machine, many working as one, as those caissons go rolling along. Outside Fort Hood's Mayborn Gate, the old main gate on Rancier Boulevard, you'll see monuments to military strength. Across the street, a monument to its most shameful failure. A temporary monument asks us to say the names of every soldier who disappeared from post in just the calendar year 2020. Ones who went missing right under the nose of the many Private First Class Brandon Rosecrans, Specialist Vanessa Gillespie, some names remembered and others largely forgotten, but all here asking us to say their names and remember them all.
The incident started adding up, some pointing to as many as 22 soldier suicides.
The numbers are high here. They are the highest in most cases for sexual assault and harassment and murders for our entire formation, the U.S. Army.
This year, incidents happened at such an alarming rate, the Army had to face and fix its problems.
We're going to put every resource and all of the energy we can in this entire institution behind fixing these problems.
A change of command on Fort Hood brought in new blood with a new mission.
Leadership requires action. We must reset here at Fort Hood and return to those fundamentals of leadership at every level.
Fort Hood's newly arrived commanding officer hit the reset button on practically every process involving interaction between soldiers on post. He brought concepts that have worked in the private sector to a new way of managing the men and women of America's fighting force.
So I think they are concepts that actually work. I think that is a place for the military to start.
Human resources expert Melanie Tolliver runs the Hopkins Group, a well-respected HR firm headquartered in Dallas. She describes General Richardson's plans as based on solid HR principles.
For instance, within my own organization, one of the things, getting to know the individuals on your team, you really understand their strengths, their weaknesses.
Next candidate, get set, begin.
And in the Army, where each life and each mission depends on the trust within a team, that information can make it or break it.
I think it is good that they're thinking in this vein. And that they do realize that it is something that they need to look at or that is critical right now.
She says the plan may not make sexual assault and race issues disappear, but it will help make them manageable and help create better understanding.
At least he has hit the reset button, and he is aware that there needs to be change, within the organization.
So a new day has begun on Fort Hood as General Richardson hits the so-called reset button. If it works, it could become a model for the entire U.S. Army. But should it?
I remember first calls in the morning, leaders were there to wake their people up in the morning. Well, today we can do that electronically. And today we don't have the physical interaction that allows, I think, for the relationships that we want.
Some brigade commanders on Fort Hood have already begun forging those relationships face-to-face on weekends with the resulting drop in problems. It could present the face of the new Army.
So most definitely, if they make it work here, I think it could serve as a baseline, for the other agencies, aligned with the military as well.
New leadership, resetting Fort Hood, moving forward, right? That's what this is about.
Will the plan work? Experts say it has a good chance to. Could it change the culture of the U.S. Army? Many say it needs to.
And perhaps moving the Army forward in its handling of people and their problems with the aim of having fewer or no names at all on the sidewalk monument. Once again, many working as one, as those caissons go rolling along.
As you just heard, in a short amount of time, we're seeing a lot of changes at Fort Hood, including an overhaul with some leadership. Coming up next in an exclusive interview, we sit down with the post commander, Lieutenant General Pat White. The man in charge of 65,000 troops at Fort Hood, a facility that covers more than 200,000 acres, is a lieutenant general who has made serving in the Army his life's work. But this year is unlike any other Pat White has faced, and he knows there is work to be done.
Lieutenant General Pat White is a man on the move, always.
That's what Operation People First is.
Get even a few minutes with him, and you better understand the 57-year-old is focused. And right now, his one and only focus is turning around the culture at Fort Hood.
When I got back, I said, wow, we have had a tough year. What can we do to reconnect with our people?
On the day we visit, White is yakking it up with young soldiers before a holiday break.
Who's going on leave? You guys ready to go on leave?
But there will be little to no break for him, especially after that scathing civilian review of Fort Hood was released earlier this month.
Your first reaction is what? So I'll give you two different reactions. One was as the commander of Fort Hood and the commander of the 3rd Armored Corps, whose headquarters is here at Fort Hood. That was a punch in the gut. You know, it was disappointment, a little bit of anger.
The report, some 150 plus pages, sheds light on why and how so many sexual assaults have gone unreported on post, but also examines other issues like suicide and murder and how a lack of leadership or oversight may be a factor.
Was that missing?
What a great question. I think that what was missing was what you would generally call inspect, don't expect that things are happening inside your formations.
White was actually deployed for much of the year to Iraq, so he says he didn't have regular updates on cases like Vanessa Gillespie or Gregory Wedo Morales. He says the new Operation People First initiative, aimed at rebuilding trust between soldiers, families, and the public, is critical for the post to move forward.
And to the moms and the dads and generally the public that is out there, you know, we're going to get after some of the challenges that were identified in that report. But we're going to do it through engaged leadership, and we're going to rebuild the trust of your sons and daughters. And you need to know that.
Strong words from the man at the top who says he's committed to a positive change now more than ever.
Fort Hood's commander vowing transparency in the wake of the independent review findings, and we got the opportunity to hear from soldiers on post for the first time.
The majority of the time, we hear from high-ranking officials and spokesmen from Fort Hood. But earlier this month, when the Independent Review Board released their findings, Commanding General Pat White acknowledged those flaws highlighted in the investigation. But for the first time ever, we got to talk directly to soldiers. Lieutenant White taking things a step further, staying committed to transparency by giving those soldiers a chance to ask him questions. Of the 6 who stepped forward, only 2 were female.
So when I was a private, I was in Korea and I was sexually assaulted by my NCO. Despite the DNA evidence, despite what was said, despite the testimonies, despite the eyewitnesses. And he got not guilty on all 5 charges.
Both sharing their stories of sexual assault.
I was living in the same barracks with the person who raped me a year before I left for that deployment, but I couldn't do anything about that because they said either you are going to get kicked out of the barracks or you're just going to have to deal with it.
The independent review revealing the overwhelming majority of female soldiers they interviewed stated they did not feel they could report sexual assault or harassment due to fear of retaliation. Their male counterparts speaking out in support of them too.
It made me feel a little bit angry that the leadership failed them. I hear stories about NCOs not getting punished or just getting demoted and then the next year regaining their rank.
All agreeing leadership, regardless of rank, need to be held accountable for their actions or lack thereof.
Incorporating some sort of punishment could prevent the problems.
Not only do we need to be more expansive for sharp regulations, but when it comes to court martials and JAG, we need to be equal on both of those as well, so that females feel comfortable speaking about this.
And not take it with just a grain of salt, because it's not a joke.
White thanked the soldiers for having the courage to step forward and share their stories, adding he is wholeheartedly committed to repairing the sexual assault review process, stepping up to be a part of the review board himself. General White says rebuilding accountability and trust won't happen overnight, but he encourages everyone to be the change they want to see.
We've got a problem we got to fix. And a 3-star general can't fix it on his own, because we can have all the programs in the world, but if we don't trust our chain of command, it's not going to work.
From hashtags to celebrities using their platforms, many are crediting the global attention Vanessa's story received to social media. Here's a deeper look into the way social media helped spark a global movement.
When quarantine started, social media was an outlet to escape, but for the Guillen family, it was a tool to help find Vanessa. What started behind the walls of Fort Hood quickly gained a new life on the internet.
You know, on average, most people have about 500 Facebook friends. So if you're saying it, about 500 other people are going to see it. Whether or not they believe it, that's 500 people closer to finding justice.
The first post on the Find Vanessa Gillespie Instagram account was made on June 4th. Since then, the account has gained 175,000 followers. Then the movement pivoted. The hashtag I am Vanessa Gillespie gave servicemen and women the outlet to share their stories of sexual harassment and sexual assault.
So it gives them an outlet, but also it gives them a chance to see that they're not alone. Because it can be very isolating and we don't talk about it.
The Gillespie family was able to find solace and even justice through social media. But what about other crime victims and their families? Mosier and Brown say the first thing to do is just share your story.
You really want to stand up for people right away because the internet will move on so fast. So you need to speak up, you need to speak out, call everyone, nag everyone.
Again, you'd be surprised how many people can say, I saw that person here, or I saw them here 2 days ago. And we get good leads that then we can forward on to law enforcement and let them follow up with. But the hashtags are really important because the hashtags is how you can connect everything across platforms, across, across state lines, across the country.
A soldier finally laid to rest. It's the moment people from all over traveled to see for themselves. We take you back to that moment.
Frustration out of Fort Hood tonight after nearly 2 months, still not one sign of missing soldier Vanessa Gillespie.
Fort Hood officials confirming today the remains found along the Leon River last week have been positively identified as Vanessa Gillespie.
Remembering Vanessa Gillespie, today is both a somber and special day for the Gillespie family and those who joined forces to seek justice for the fallen Fort Hood specialist.
Months of questions.
Where is Vanessa? We need answers!
Months of fear.
They're just like my sister. They just want to fight for us.
All coming to a head for a moment of tragedy. The story of slain Fort Hood soldier Vanessa Gillespie has touched the hearts of thousands.
I didn't know her, but, as a military veteran, we all won. And we support each other.
For months, Vanessa's family, friends, and the community searching for answers into the disappearance of Specialist Gillespie on April 22, 2020. With hope to be reunited with the Army soldier, her disappearance sparking a movement across the country.
It affects me personally because I'm a vet and I went through that too. I think that's why it became personal to me because I've been through what she went through.
Back in July, Fort Hood officials brought that hope to a tragic end when they confirmed the remains found by the Leon River to be that of Specialist Vanessa Gillespie.
Sadly, I stand here to report that the search for Specialist Vanessa Gillespie has resulted in the very outcome that I had prayed it would not have from the very beginning. The Armed Forces Forensic Examiner has determined through DNA analysis that the remains found near the Leon River are in fact those of Vanessa.
One family's tragedy led to a movement, a rallying cry for change in the United States Army. So what happened to Vanessa never happens to another Army soldier ever again.
It affects everybody in the military, and we need this bill to pass so everything can change.
My sister deserves to make history, to be remembered, and to be honored by a bill!
But this fight transcends the tragedy of Vanessa.
I hope another mom doesn't have to do this. I hope the only worries that military parents need in the future is when their soldiers are sent overseas.
It brings a little bit more closure for families like Gregory Wedo, who still hope for answers.
All these families going through this at the same time, at least we have each other. But it's the saddest group and saddest reason to have this group.
Our coverage tonight only focuses on a handful of the nearly 30 soldiers posted to Fort Hood who've lost their lives this year. Homicide, suicide, accidents, every case leaves behind a devastated family.
In closing tonight, we leave you with the images of those young men and women who served our country.